Sony has a new compact mid-range phone, the Xperia 10 Mark VI. The previous model was known for its battery life, so what's the Mark VI's claim to fame? I'm Will for GSMArena, and let's find out in our full review. This video is sponsored by GSM. We'll tell you more about that in a little bit. The Xperia 10 Mark VI doesn't break the mold. Far from it. It's more of a generational refresh for Sony's mid-range offering. The most significant changes you'll find here are a new chipset, and actually one less camera on the backside. The design of the Mark VI is basically identical to that of the Mark V. The phone is quite lightweight, and relatively tall and thin because of the display's tall aspect ratio. And again, both the back and the frame are made of plastic. Like last year's model, the Mark VI brings ingress protection, rated at IP65/IP68. That's nice to have in a mid-ranger. The display of the phone is again a 6.1-inch OLED with a 1080p resolution, a tall 21:9 aspect ratio, and Gorilla Glass Victus protection. Sony still hasn't increased the refresh rate here. At 60Hz, it's less smooth than what you get on most competitors, which offer a high refresh rate on their displays. The max brightness, though, is slightly better than before. We measured up to 660 nits with a manual slider, and this can boost up to over 1000 in auto mode if you need it. The panel looks decent. It's sharp and contrasty, and there's support for HDR video and 10-bit color depth. And the cinematic aspect ratio is something unique. But we did notice that there is a strong color shift here, which you don't typically see on an OLED panel. The Xperia 10 Mark VI has a 3.5mm jack for headphones. And there's also a pair of front-facing speakers for your audio. They're louder than last year's, and the sound quality is good, with no distortion and clean mids and highs. You can wake up and unlock the phone with a side-mounted fingerprint reader built into the power button. It's responsive. And the Xperia 10 Mark VI comes with 128 gigs of storage on board, and that is expandable through a microSD slot on the SIM tray. Speaking of SIMs, are you planning to use data abroad and worried about those hefty roaming fees? You might want to check out a digital SIM solution through this video's sponsor, GSM. Setting up your eSIM is easy. Just download the GSM app from the App Store or Google Play. Then pick any eSIM card from the extensive offers list and activate it, and you're ready to connect to the internet. There are a number of packages to choose from regional to global options, even unlimited ones, and the pricing is competitive in popular destinations like the Caribbean. If you get the international eSIM package, there's support for over 200 countries, and you only pay for the number of megabytes you actually use. There are bonuses to take advantage of too, like for your first top-up, and there's a referral program and seasonal discounts. And since you're here, you can even get an extra perk. Use the GSMArena promo code for an additional bonus to your first GSM top-up. Now let's get back to the Xperia 10 Mark VI. The interface of the phone is very close to stock Android 14. There is a visual difference though on the notification shade. Sony has swapped the larger quick toggles for more compact square ones. Some of the custom Sony features that you'd find on the flagship model are missing, such as the game enhancer. You do get the multi-window switch though. It's basically two task switchers stacked on top of one another, meant for navigating between and opening apps in split screen mode. SideSense allows you to open a menu of shortcuts to apps and features through a handle on the side of the screen. And one improvement over last year's model is that Sony has committed to 3 years of OS updates and 4 years of security patches for the Xperia 10 Mark VI. Like I mentioned before, the Xperia 10 Mark VI brings a new chipset. It's a Snapdragon 6 Gen 1, instead of the Snapdragon 695, which powered the previous couple of generations. The performance was one gripe we had with last year's model, and we're glad to see an upgrade here. The Xperia 10 Mark VI does a decent job in benchmarks, placing around the middle of the pack of its competitors. There are other mid-rangers at this price point that are better, especially when it comes to graphics performance. But still, there's enough power here to run your daily tasks and some light games without hiccups. The thermal management is improved compared to last year too, with the performance remaining relatively stable during our stress tests. The Xperia 10 Mark V had some of the best battery life we'd seen on a phone, but this time around the results aren't quite as exciting. Still, while the Xperia 10 Mark VI doesn't top the charts, it did a great job in our tests. With its 5000 mAh battery, it earned an active use score of almost 14 hours, which is quite competitive. The Xperia 10 Mark VI doesn't come with a charger in the box, and its official capabilities aren't clear, but it's slow. With a proper adapter, we were able to charge the phone from 0 to just 36% in half an hour, and a full charge took nearly 2 hours. Now we're onto the cameras, which, like I mentioned, have been trimmed from a triple camera setup on the back to just 2. Sony has done away with the 2x telephoto, so this year you get a 48 megapixel main cam and an 8 megapixel ultrawide, both the same as on the previous model. Sony has a redesigned and more simplified camera app this year. Our only issue is that now you no longer have something like a manual or a pro mode. Sony justifies that by claiming that its AI can take care of the settings automatically, but we miss the extra versatility. The Xperia 10 Mark VI captures contrasty images with this main cam. They have dark shadows and saturated colors which don't appear very natural, especially the greenery. Given that the Xperia 10 Mark VI and Mark V use the same main camera sensor, we expected very similar overall photo quality, but they're noticeably different. In low light, the output by the new model again is quite different. You get much more detailed low light photos, with more accurate color rendition. We see great color saturation, but these photos are still quite contrasty, so the shadows turn out noticeably dark. Because of the new chipset, the Xperia 10 Mark VI is able to record 4K video with this main camera, something its predecessor couldn't do. The clips have a decent amount of detail and alright dynamic range. Just like with the photos, you get an overly contrasty look with quite saturated colors, which we can't say that we're fans of. It may seem like a major downgrade to be missing the telephoto camera, but the quality of last year's zoom camera wasn't that great to begin with. The 2x digital zoom from the Mark VI's main cam is not the sharpest there is, but in daylight it's not that far from the quality of last year's zoom camera. And in low light, the 2x digital zoom produces much nicer photos than last year's optical zoom camera. Photos from the 8 megapixel ultrawide camera are much better this year. You get a great level of detail for this sort of camera. The colors are saturated, but at least the contrast isn't over the top like with the main camera. In fact, we quite like the dynamic range here. Low light shots with the ultrawide are quite alright. You get better detail definition than you did on the Xperia 10 Mark V, and better contrast with more natural looking highlights, even if some of them are clipped. Videos from the ultrawide cam come out at 1080p. The detail is good for this sort of resolution, and the colors and contrast look much more natural than what you get out of the main cam. Selfies are taken with an 8 megapixel front-facing cam. The output here is quite different from what we got last year, and we can't say that the change is for the better. The level of detail is fine, but the skin tones don't come out natural, and dynamic range is not very wide either. So that's the Xperia 10 Mark VI. Like its predecessor, it's a mid-ranger that brings a unique and compact form factor with solid ingress protection. The speakers and battery life are commendable, and this year the chipset is improved and there's better software support. Probably the biggest downside here is the display. It's got a strong color shift and it's 60 Hz. You'll get a smoother high refresh rate on most other smartphones these days. If that doesn't bother you, the Xperia 10 Mark VI could be worth looking into. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're looking for alternatives, you can check out our reviews of the Samsung Galaxy A55 and the Nothing Phone 2A. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.